This time last season, Isaiah Thomas took the floor for the Boston Celtics just days after the tragic and sudden loss of his sister in a car accident. On top of that, Thomas was clearly playing hurt for the latter part of the regular season and the playoffs, dealing with a constant hip issue that would later require surgery. But through it all, he battled through, showing incredible determination and perseverance in doing so. Boston's season eventually ended in the Eastern Conference Finals in 5 games to the Cavs, but there was no doubt that Thomas had given everything he had for the team, fighting through the most difficult of circumstances. As a result, a special bond was built between him and the Celtics franchise, a team that Thomas had already shown he would do anything for, a sentiment he doubled down on in the offseason. You see, throughout his entire Celtics tenure, he was one of the best bargains in the league, playing under a contract he had signed in the summer of 2014 with the Suns, which paid him just $7.2 million at its highest point. But with that contract set to expire after the 2018 season, there was speculation that he would seek an extension after his All-NBA caliber 2016-17 campaign, something he would have had every right to do. This was a guy that was selected with the very last pick in the draft, but had managed to scratch and claw his way into a role as a valuable scorer, and eventually with the Celtics, one of the best guards in the league. But again, just like he had in the postseason, he made sacrifices for the team. Thomas recognized that Boston was very close to overtaking the Cavs as the best team in the East. All they needed was 1 or 2 more pieces to put themselves over the top. So he told the team that he'd be willing to wait on contract extension talks until they'd addressed other free agency needs, so as not to take up the cap space needed to make those moves. And boy, did they ever make moves. They added Gordon Hayward in free agency, Jason Tatum in the draft, and along with the progression of some other young players, they looked to have set themselves up to give the Cavs a real run for their money next season. The problem for Thomas was that the Celtics weren't quite done making those moves that he had generously sacrificed his own financial gain to allow them to make. In August, a disgruntled Kyrie Irving was traded from the Cavs in exchange for Thomas and a handful of other players and draft picks. Less than half a year after he played through tragedy and physical pain to do everything he could for the Celtics, they simply traded him away for someone younger, better, and healthier. At the time, it didn't seem like that big of a deal because many people saw Thomas as simply a replacement for Irving at the 1 for the Cavs, albeit one that would take time to gel with his new team and return fully from his injury. Cleveland was supposed to plug in Isaiah, add young talent with their shiny new high draft pick from the Nets, and keep the machine rolling. But as we all know, that isn't what happened. Thomas never really looked right returning from injury. The situation in Cleveland was clearly much more dysfunctional than the one he was cast away from in Boston. He undeservedly developed a bad reputation as a source of the Cavs' many issues and was traded to the Lakers at the deadline just months into his tenure with the team. Now as his free agency approaches this offseason, things look much bleaker than anyone could have imagined for Thomas. He turns 30 next year, is generously listed at 5'9", is less than a year removed from major hip issues that he clearly still hasn't recovered from, and has developed a reputation as someone that some people might not want to have around as a result of an awful situation with the Cavs. That isn't exactly a recipe for a big contract. Had he signed an extension with the Celtics last offseason, it likely would have been similar to what Jrue Holiday signed with the Pelicans, a deal that was worth over $120 million. Before you gawk at that, keep in mind that Thomas was coming off one of the greatest little guard seasons in NBA history and made the All-NBA second team. Taking it back further than that, he could have just decided to shut it down late in the season as his hip injury was getting progressively worse, not unlike Kyrie Irving did this season. But again, he decided to make sacrifices for the team. He played through the injury, through tragedy, put the team in front of himself in the offseason, and it likely cost him $100 million in the process. If he gets an offer from a team worth more than $25 or $30 million in total this season, I'd be shocked. A 2 or 3 year deal paying him between $8 and $9 million a year seems like about the right value for him at this point as a valuable scorer, potentially in a 6-man role. You might not agree with that assessment, but there isn't as much cap space around the league anymore as there was when guys like Joakim Noah were getting $70 million+ contracts, and Thomas has an unfortunately long list of red flags to his name at this point. Had he shut it down and had the surgery sooner, he likely would still be in Boston or Cleveland getting ready to cash in on a big payday. Or if he had been more aggressive in seeking an extension last summer, that day might already have been here. He would have at the very least been the healthy version of himself that averaged nearly 29 points a game and led his team to the conference finals. Now, I don't say all of this to say that we should feel bad for Thomas. At the end of the day, he's a grown man and he made those decisions himself, and I don't blame him for them. It is such a celebrated quality in our sports culture to be unselfish and to be a team player, but we don't hold franchises to the same standard. They will always do what is best for themselves and for business, which is why I don't understand why people get upset when players do the same. These guys have 10 to 15 years at best to make as much money as they can and be as successful as they can to set themselves up for the rest of their lives. Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and Kawhi Leonard have made some mistakes in how they've gone about it, but I don't blame them one bit for decisions they have made to make themselves more successful. Should Durant have talked to Russ about leaving for the Warriors before he did? Probably. Should LeBron have never announced his decision to leave Cleveland for Miami in an awful television event? Absolutely. Should Kawhi Leonard at least be with the team while he rehabs his injury in advance of what's probably going to be a massive contract extension? Sure. But when you consider the story of Thomas, a guy who did everything he could for his team and got screwed out of millions of dollars for it, can you really blame them for their decisions? It's easy for us as fans to sit back and criticize players for decisions that aren't considered loyal or team-based, especially when it negatively impacts our own team. I get it, and I've done it more than my fair share as well. But these are real people with real lives and families to provide for, and their careers are always one missed time jump, one bad landing, one unfortunate incident away from vanishing completely. Forever. Isaiah Thomas will never get that $100 million back, and like I said, those decisions he made and the consequences that come with them are things that he's going to have to live with. But more than anything, use this story as a reminder that loyalty has no place in sports at the business level or at the franchise level, and we shouldn't expect anything different at the personnel level. Don't look back on the days of old when players would stay with their teams through thick and thin, no matter what, and think that's how it ought to be. That just isn't the reality anymore. If there's one thing to take away from this video, let it be this. Loyalty in sports is dead.